You went downstairs to grab something from the basement, and you saw it. A patch of white, chalky and rough, spreading across the concrete or the brick, like frost that does not melt. It was not there last year, or maybe it was, and it has been growing. And your first instinct is the one almost everyone has. Get a wire brush, scrub it off. Or, better yet, paint right over it and pretend the wall was always clean. Put the brush down for 1 minute. Because that white crust is not dirt and it is not mold, and scrubbing it away or burying it under a coat of paint does not solve a single thing. It only erases the one clue your house is using to warn you. That bloom is a message, written on your wall in mineral, and it is telling you that water is moving through a place water is not supposed to be. Today I am going to show you what that white stain actually is, what it is trying to tell you, and why making it disappear is the worst thing you can do. So let me tell you what you are actually looking at, because the name makes it sound more mysterious than it is. It is called efflorescence, and it is nothing more than salt. Concrete, brick, mortar, and the soil pressing against your foundation are all full of natural mineral salts. On their own, those salts sit there harmlessly for decades, but the moment water finds its way into the masonry, everything changes. The water soaks into the wall, dissolves those salts as it travels, and carries them along with it. When that damp wall finally reaches the open air of your basement, the water evaporates. The salts cannot evaporate, so they are left behind on the surface as a white crystalline crust, the dried footprint of water that passed through and vanished. That is all efflorescence is. It is not the water problem itself, it is the fingerprint the water leaves behind on its way out. Which means every patch of that white bloom is marking the exact path that moisture took to get from the outside of your home to the inside of your wall. And that is what makes it so much more useful than ugly. Because efflorescence does not appear randomly. It appears wherever water is getting in, and the way it appears tells you a story if you know how to read it. A thin band of it low on the wall, near the floor, often means water is wicking up from the ground through the base of the foundation. A patch around a single spot can be marking a crack you cannot see, a gap in the mortar where water is sneaking through. A bloom that spreads wide across a whole section after every heavy rain is telling you the soil outside that wall is staying soaked and pushing moisture straight through the concrete. The pattern is a map. The wall is showing you, in the only ink it has, exactly where your home's defenses against water are failing. And here is the part most people never connect. The amount of it matters too. A faint dusting that shows up once and never grows can be the wall simply curing and shedding its first salts, which is normal, especially in a newer build. But a crust that keeps coming back, that thickens, that returns every spring when the ground is wet, is not cosmetic at all. It is a moisture problem that is actively ongoing, repeating itself every time it rains, and the white you are looking at is just the visible edge of a much larger amount of water moving through your wall where you cannot see it. Scrub that off without asking why it is there, and you have wiped the warning off the dashboard while the engine light is still on underneath. Let me take the fear out of this though, because finding it does not mean your house is rotting out from under you. Efflorescence is one of the most common things you can find on a basement or foundation wall, because almost every masonry home meets water somewhere along its base and produces it at some point. It is not a sign that you have neglected anything or that your house is uniquely broken. It is simply the visible end of an ordinary, invisible journey that water makes through stone and concrete. The previous owner who painted over yours was not fixing the wall. They were quieting it, hiding the message so the basement looked finished, and leaving the actual water to keep doing whatever it had been doing all along, now sealed politely out of sight. Now there is one thing you genuinely do need to sort out, because it changes how worried you should be. People constantly confuse efflorescence with mold, and they are not the same, and you can tell them apart in about 10 seconds. Efflorescence is a mineral. It is white, or sometimes a pale gray or tan. It feels gritty or crystalline like dried salt, and it grows on stone, brick, and concrete. Mold is alive. It is usually black, green, or fuzzy. It grows on organic material, like wood, paper, and a drywall, and it does not sparkle. The simplest test is water. Spray a little onto the patch. Efflorescence will dissolve and fade because it is salt. Mold will not because it is not. So efflorescence itself will not hurt you. It is a harmless mineral. But do not relax too far, because the moisture that creates efflorescence is the exact same moisture that mold needs to grow. The white crust is not dangerous, but it is standing in the doorway of every problem that is. Damp wood, peeling paint, mold in the framing, and given enough time and enough freezing, the slow crumbling of the masonry itself. And this is the idea I most want you to hold on to. The efflorescence is a symptom. It is never the disease. The disease is outside and behind the wall, in the places you have to go looking for. It is in the gutter that is overflowing and dumping rain at the base of your foundation. It is in the ground that slopes toward your house instead of away from it. It is in a downspout that ends 6 inches from the wall instead of 6 feet. It is in a high water table that rises every spring. The white bloom on your basement wall is the single piece of that entire hidden water system that you can actually see with your own eyes. Its real value is not the patch itself. It is the warning it gives you about all the water you cannot see, the water that is patiently looking for every other way into your home. So here is what you actually do, and notice that scrubbing comes last, not first. Start by not making it wet. Do not blast it with water or scrub it with a soaking sponge, because all that does is redissolve the salts and drive them deeper into the wall to come back worse later. If you want a clean sample to look at, brush it gently with a dry, stiff brush. Then turn around and go outside, because the real fix almost always is. Walk the ground along that wall after a rain and see where the water sits. Make sure the soil slopes away from the foundation, not toward it. Clean your gutters and add extensions so your downspouts carry water at least several feet from the house. These are cheap fixes, and they solve the majority of basement moisture problems before you ever spend $1 on the wall itself. Then watch. If the efflorescence stops coming back, you found it. If it returns after the next storm, the water is still getting in, and you keep looking. Only once the wall has stayed dry through a few good rains should you clean it properly, and, if you choose, seal it with a real masonry waterproofing product, never ordinary paint. And if it keeps returning no matter what you do, or the masonry starts flaking and crumbling, that is your signal to bring in a foundation or waterproofing professional before a moisture problem becomes a structural one. The white bloom on your basement wall is not a stain to be scrubbed away and forgotten. It is a message, written patiently in salt, telling you something about your home that you would have no other way of knowing. It does not deserve a wire brush and a coat of paint. It deserves to be read. So the next time you go downstairs and see that pale crust spreading across the concrete, do not reach for the brush and erase it. Stop. Ask it where the water is coming from. The wall has been trying to tell you for a while now. The least you can do is listen before you paint over its voice. Have you ever found a strange white crust, a damp patch, or a stain in your basement and wondered what your house was trying to tell you? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one, and the stories this community shares are some of my favorites. And if today changed the way you look at the quiet, overlooked corners of your own home, then something just shifted in how you see the place you live. That shift is what this channel is built on. I will see you in the next one.